So here's the thing about the eukaryotes. The eukaryotes are advanced cells. They have a lot of working parts to them. They have a very distinct nucleus. They're very good at what they do. Prokaryotes don't really do much except divide. Eukaryotes develop specific skill sets. A eukaryote cell can develop a skill set that will allow it to function like a liver cell. At that point, we call the eukaryote cell a hepatocyte. Some eukaryote cells become skin cells. Other eukaryote cells become bone cells and heart cells and muscle cells and on and on and on. There's about 200 different kinds of cells in the body. And each one of these cells is specialized, has a specific role. The cells that we call liver cells do something very interesting. They merge together to form an organ, in a way giving up their independence so that they can give life to a bigger structure, bigger than it. It's a very religious phenomenon. It's a very Christian phenomenon. They die so that they can give life to the greater being. Very interesting stuff, but it requires a certain amount of resources for a cell to become a specialized hepatocyte. It requires a certain amount of oxygen. It requires a certain amount of cleanliness. It requires a certain amount of nutrition. Over time, cells don't get what they need, and they start to become dysfunctional. Now, under ordinary circumstances, dysfunctional cells, the body has a lot of safeguards to protect itself from dysfunctional cells. Dysfunctional cells can be eaten up by the immune system. Dysfunctional cells actually have a self-destruct mechanism inside of them. Like the old Mission Impossible movies, this message will self-destruct in 10 seconds. I used to love that when I was a kid. So couldn't wait for the tape to just dissolve, to self-destruct. Cells do that. They self-destruct. But occasionally, cells sneak by. They sneak by the surveillance, the immune system surveillance, and for whatever reason, the self-destruct mechanism doesn't work. It works 99.99% of the time, but you're talking about billions of cells here. You're talking about trillions of cells here. So if it works 99.999% of the time, that means 1 out of every 100,000 or so, or million or so, is going to sneak through, and it is going to do something very different because it doesn't have enough resources, because it doesn't have enough oxygen, because it doesn't have enough nutrition, because it's swimming in an ocean of toxicity. It will revert back in time. It will go backwards in time to a time when it was able to function with low resources, especially low oxygen, by the way, and also low nutrition, largely because that facilitates oxygen utilization, and toxicity because that interrupts or interferes with oxygen utilization. So there's a large body of evidence, a lot of very bright people, including Nobel Prize-winning a guy named Otto Warburg, who believe that oxygen is behind this, or lack of oxygen is behind this phenomena. It's a respiratory phenomenon. Any way you look at it, it's at the end of the day, as an end result of this distress, the cell will go backwards in time from the eukaryote stage to the prokaryote stage. It will become a prokaryote. It will divide like a prokaryote. It won't actually literally become a prokaryote because it'll still have a lot of eukaryote internal structuring. It'll be much more internally structuring, but it'll still be disorganized. This is the problem with cancer cells. They're disorganized. They're not functional. They don't become a liver. They don't become a bone. They just become a tumor. They just become a parasite. They just utilize all the resources. They're like, in a way, metaphorically, they're like, screw you. I've been starved, I've been suffocated, I've been toxic for so long. Now I'm going to go about and do my business. I'm going to take what I need. They become sociopathic. They become rogue. And they become sociopathic and they become rogue as an end result of the abuse they've suffered over the course of a lifetime. Cancer is a cancerous cell. The formation of cancer, which technically is a tumor that is malignant, that spreads, or that wants to spread, the cancer tumor is the end result of lifestyle issues. Now, there are certain things that can trigger cancer instantaneously, like most especially ionizing radiation, but it has to be really strong, super strong. And even that takes a little bit of time. It's not like it's going to be instantaneous. So this idea of things causing cancer is a complete misunderstanding of what cancer is. Every bit as much as the idea that we're going to find a cure for cancer. At best, and there are some cancers that can be cured pharmacologically speaking, they'll build the immune system, they'll strengthen the immune system, or they'll have artificial immunity. They'll have a drug version of the immune system that kills or targets the cancer. But for the most part, when you have cancer, you have a long developing issue, which gets us to another very important point. Everybody has cancers inside their body all the time, but that doesn't mean that they become tumors. That doesn't mean that you end up with a full-blown diagnosis, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4 cancer. Because the immune system is constantly clearing things out, and the cancer cell shows up because there is a certain amount of duress, and the immune system clears them out, and there's this constant thing that's going on. When people die, they find breast cancer cells in there, they find prostate cancer cells in there, they find melanoma cancer cells in there, and the patient didn't even know. This happens all the time. So you got to be really careful about the whole diagnosis of cancer. A lot of times people will get diagnosed by the detection of cancer cells, which we can do better and better now, and then they'll get pharmacologically treated at best, or they'll get surgically distorted at worst, based on certain kinds of cancers. So just because you have the appearance of certain cancer cells, so just because you have cells in your body that are cancerous doesn't mean you're going to get the full disease of cancer. So there's not going to be a cure for cancer. Cancer always is in the body. At any given moment, there are cancerous cells inside the body. Cancer can be reversed, but not cured. And by that I mean cancer can be reversed by changing the environment that the cell is swimming in. Now, it takes some work because it took a long time for the cell to actually flip in to becoming a prokaryote, to dividing like a prokaryote, to dividing in this mindless, I don't mean this unintelligent kind of way, just randomly dividing and not cooperating, being rogue. So it's going to take a little bit of time and a little bit of effort, but it can be done. Number one, because there's systems inside the body that do it, we know that because cancers come and go all the time. Really interesting New York Times article, by the way, that talks about this from 2009. You might want to Google it if you're interested in this topic. Google cancers come and go, doctors mystified, something along those lines. New York Times, 2009 or 2010. You get an interesting article. So cancers come and go. We know that. That means there is a system in place in the body. There's a system built in to carve out cancers, to reverse cancers, to eliminate cancers, I should say. And then the second proof is all of the cancer reversals that there are. All of the cancer remissions that there are. I have a textbook called Spontaneous Remissions. They call them spontaneous, not because they happen instantly, but because they happen for no known reason. They just happen. And they think it's considered an outlier. In the medical world, it's considered an outlier, but 1 out of every 100,000 or so cancers spontaneously remit. And there's a lot of literature on this. So, number one, the body's constantly clear. Number one, you always have cancer. Number two, the body's constantly clearing it out. There's systems in place. And number three, while it's not going to be cured because it's the end result of abuse, and I don't mean to blame the victim here, but I'm just being real, because it's the end result of lifestyle issues, that means that there's things we can do in our lifestyle, as proven by the voluminous amounts of the voluminous literature on describing spontaneous remission. That means that if we change the environment, if we understand the cellular mechanism, that it's stress, duress, abuse, if we change the environment the cell is in, and I'll tell you what I mean by that in a second, we can theoretically, and by if you look at all the literature, actually reverse cancers by reversing the situation that the cancer cell happens to find itself in, the circumstances that the cancer cell finds itself in. So what do I mean by things we can do to change those circumstances? Well, food and nutrition get all the press. I'm going to take another break here real quick.